Hello, y'all. I am fortunate enough to be here today with Mr. Greg. Greg, I'm not going to steal your thunder. Who the heck are you, and what are you doing here today?
Well, Ryan, it's great to be on your show. As someone who's been a speaker for the last 25 years, I'm always interested in kind of discussing changes in the speaking business and who people are trying to reach and what people are trying to get out of a speaker when they attend a corporate event. And I think we both know that has changed a little bit over the years. And I'm always interested to hear other people's observations on that topic as well.
So you've been speaking 20 years. Have you always been speaking in corporate?
Pretty much so, yeah. I mean, I'm a humor speaker. So I started as a club comedian, but I transitioned into corporate. It was kind of an interesting way that I did transition is while I was doing comedy clubs, which don't really pay the bills too well. I also took a side hustle doing as a trade show narrator. And I would go around the country. I was that guy on the trade show floor that had the headset on and the headset and mic and did the same presentation twice an hour for 8 hours over the course of 3 days. But being on trade show floors and speaking to corporate audiences and having to get their attention in a very short amount of time, it opened up a whole new world to me. And I thought there's really something here because the idea that corporate audiences like to laugh at themselves. Even though I was delivering a prepared presentation, a lot of my clients would let me go off script a little bit and kind of riff with the audience. And I started writing material about business and putting it into my nightclub act. And then I had people say, hey, you should come down to our company function and do those jokes. And that was kind of how I transitioned into corporate.
And one thing that I'm noticing interviewing a lot of professional speakers here is some of the best speakers, they make the audience feel such a wide variety of emotions in their gig. There's, you're almost crying, you're laughing, there's everything in between, right?
Yeah.
But not everyone has the best comedic sense of humor. So
you talking about speakers or audience members?
Speakers. Yeah. So for guidance, you being someone who, specializes in humor, how the heck can a speaker be more funny from what you've learned?
Yeah, well, I do think that corporate audiences do enjoy laughing at themselves. However, I got to preface that a little bit because there's a very fine line between having fun with an audience and insulting what they do.
Yeah.
Insulting their work, insulting the product that they're selling or that they're pitching or something. Once you cross that line, you're never going to get them back. I have learned how to straddle that line a little bit. And that's why I work with my clients and I ask them point blank before we start, what are the boundaries here? What don't you want me to bring up? I mean, I research every client that I talk about that that hires me. But I know that there are certain things that are off limits. And it would be great if you would tell me that ahead of time, because I want my presentation, I want first and foremost to make you laugh. I want you to come out of that ballroom or wherever it is we happen to have that presentation feeling better about yourself, your role in the company, the fact that the company hired me or hired a humorist as part of their event. I don't want people to go away ticked off. And I think a lot of speakers, unfortunately, make that mistake when they, as you say, try and delve into humor when they're not really good at that.
And I think you're mentioning something really interesting. You're talking about how you know the audience really well. You know which lines not to cross with them. How can someone get to better know their audience, to know what is actually funny to them?
Yeah, well, I think you have to just point blank ask. I think that's what the pre-show prep is about. What kind of a year have you had? Has it been good? Has it been bad? Have you had layoffs? What are you excited about? I always say, do you have a new product on the horizon? What are you pitching? Tell me about that. Because if you're excited about it, I want to be excited about it too. Because I know that's pretty much what you're going to be talking about at this event. If you've had to lay off a quarter of your workforce, I want to know that too. Does that mean I want to do jokes about layoffs? No, it's because that's not a funny subject. But it's going to help the way that I set up material, in the sense that if you've had a really tough year, I'm going to start my presentation or somewhere slip in with that. I know this hasn't been the best year. You've had to take a few hits, and we all do. We all have to take hits in our professional and our personal life. That doesn't mean you can't laugh at what's going on. And the idea is to kind of get the audience, let them know that I know about them. I know their highs, that I know their lows. And I'm just here to make the best of whatever situation it is.
And more from a strategic perspective, after you got your first and your second gig, how did you kind of knew what you had, you knew how you kind of wanted to brand it yourself with humor in particular. What tactical things did you do to go from, okay, I know I've got something here. I know I'm a good speaker. I know I got good humor. I can make these people laugh. How did you kind of push the gas to grow your speaking business from a tactical perspective?
I think it really wasn't that difficult because there are very few humor speakers out there. I realized that I had stumbled upon a niche, for lack of a better word, and it was just a question now of convincing people. And I still do this. And this is 25 years later. I'm still convincing corporate audiences it is okay. It is okay to have somebody like me at your event. It is okay to cut loose for an hour and laugh at yourselves. And I mean, obviously, corporate meetings, they're designed for a purpose, and that purpose is usually very serious. You want to learn about content. You want to learn about what's going on in the company, what's coming up ahead. And that's what serious speakers are for, whether it's internally within the organization, whether it's the CEO or the CMO or the CFO talking about what's going on, or maybe you hire the futurist, or you hire somebody that will tell you what, from a political landscape, what's going to happen if he gets elected versus whether she gets elected. And I have always tried to just tell people, okay, so you've got that, but you've also got this little gap in here for 1 hour. Why not just do something a little bit different and have somebody like me come in and lighten the mood a little bit? And that's pretty much what I do, even from the moment that I decided I want to be a corporate speaker. That's what I've done. I've always said, Ryan, that I think introducing humor into an event is, I say, the biggest hit and the toughest sell. Okay. First, I got to sell people, and that's what I've just talked about. But once it's done, and once I'm doing my thing on stage and people are laughing, then the decision makers look around and they realize this was a good idea. That's very gratifying.
I bet. And was it for you? Was it kind of like a wildfire? Meaning you did the first few gigs, and then your event planner started realizing, oh shit, he's got something here. There's something cool about this. Okay,
it was. That's exactly what it was. And I remember my very first, I'd say, major corporate event that I did. It was for Hewlett Packard. It was down in Orlando, and I had researched them, and I had seen, it was a particular division, and I had sort of gotten some background information on what they were selling and so forth. And I started riffing with the executives who were sitting in the front row. And it was almost, I don't know, a bit of an out of body experience for me, because I was on stage and I was seeing how much fun they were having, laughing at themselves and looking at each other and saying, he gets us. How did he come up with this stuff? And I was thinking to myself, again, I'd come from doing comedy clubs and trade shows, and I thought, wow, this is the nicest hotel I've ever performed in. This is the nicest ballroom I've ever been in. These people are sorely in need of laughter. This is where I need to be. This is where I want to be. And I'm good at it. And I've just kind of taken it from there. And has every show been great? And have I made some mistakes? And have I learned from those mistakes? Absolutely. I mean, there have been some train wrecks, which I'm happy to tell you about. Comedians love to, we love to talk about our good shows, but it's very therapeutic sometimes for us to talk our bad shows too. But I'm no better than anybody else. I mean, I've misjudged audiences. I have gone down pathways that I probably shouldn't have. And maybe I wouldn't have if I just asked a question or two beforehand that I forgot to.
A friend of mine, he's a professional speaker, and he does comedy separate from speaking to almost keep himself warm in speaking, because from the way he explained comedy to me is you're testing jokes. It's like split testing an ad. You're seeing how the audience reacts. You're really engaged with the audience, because there's a direct output of, is the joke good? More people laugh. Is it bad? Less people laugh. Like you have a direct, if it's working or not.
Right.
Whereas with speaking professionally, you don't always, it's harder to know, because there's not always that, noise, the laughter that's made to show success or not. Exactly. So he does the comedy to show that. Do you recommend that to other speakers?
I think that's what separates me from a lot of speakers. And I mean, I don't mean to sound like I'm belittling speakers, but a lot of speakers go in with the same presentation. Right. The same canned presentation, no matter who the audience is. My presentations are always different. Do I do some of the same material? I do. But because you're in automotive and you're in technology and you're in healthcare, there's going to be material and topics that I talk about in one that I would not talk about in another, which means that I am trying out new ideas every time. Are those going to hit? Let's hope, but there's no guarantee.
And a lot of speakers know each other. Behind stage, you talk with other speakers, you kind of just meet them. Maybe it's NSA or whatever events you're going to that you're meeting other speakers. What do you notice from your expertise? A lot of speakers are getting totally wrong about using humor from stage.
I think that a lot of speakers are going down a path that they have no experience in going down. And you only get one shot. And I also think when it doesn't work, it's very difficult to recover. You can't teach people to be funny, I've always said. I know there's humor classes all over the country and comedy clubs sponsor them or something. But if you don't feel comfortable being funny in front of people, don't do it. Don't try it, because if it doesn't work out, and that's why, like, I'll have CEOs say to me, I've had CEOs in the past come to me and say, hey, I need a good joke. I need a joke to start. Can you write something for me? Can you tell me a joke? And I always respectfully decline, because I can give you a joke, but if it doesn't work, if it doesn't get the reaction, how are you going to respond to that? I can't bail you out. So I think that's probably the best advice I would give to some speakers, is just, you do with what you're good at, and don't try to do something that you're not good at. I mean, I know there are certain things I can't give financial advice. So why would I speak in front of a bunch of financial executives and do that? I'm way out of my league.
And from your 25 years of experience, what would you say are things that you expected to be a certain way in professional speaking, but you've learned that they're the exact opposite, or your perception was completely wrong? Because a lot of other people might have those same things with where they're at right now, and maybe you save them some time and some trial and error.
Yeah, I think that you have to treat every audience individually. Okay. And that goes back to the whole canned speech thing. Even if you have this one presentation about this one topic that you are the foremost expert in, or you think you're the foremost expert in it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to play out the exact same way every time. And that's where I think research comes in a little bit, and just getting to know people and maybe sort of anticipating, maybe this audience isn't as high on your topic as the presentation you gave last week in a different part of the country. And how are you going to be able to pivot? Do you have a backup plan if that's not working? I think, for me, I think comedians, we always kind of have a plan B. In my case, it might be if I don't feel what I'm saying is resonating, I might want to talk to the audience. I might want to do a little bit of crowd work, ask them what they do for the company. What do you do? How long have you been with the organization? But that requires improvisational skills too, which a lot of people don't have. So, but I would say always have a backup. Just never think you're going to crush it every single time.
So when I watch comedians, a lot of times, some of the clips you see on YouTube and social media that's shared is the crowd work that they do, riffing with the crowd, because it's the most authentic, genuine, and a lot of times some of the funniest stuff.
Yeah.
Do you notice a lot of speakers do crowd work, or is that something that the improv and the comedian in you has really gotten good at, that you train speakers you can improve at this?
There's a couple of ways to answer that. Number one, crowd work has gotten very popular in clubs. I'm not 100% sure why. I think COVID had something to do with that a little bit, because I think when during COVID, people watched comedians off their phone and so forth, and they, as weird as it sounds, they could chat and they could type their responses and things like that and so forth. And that was their way of feeling like they were a part of the show. And then when live events come back, they're like, well, now I'm here and I'm 50 feet away from the comedian. So I'm just going to, I want them to talk to me. So I want to be part of the show, because that's what we do now. And then you've got some comedians like Matt Rife, who that's all they do is crowd work. I'm not sure I totally agree with that approach, but it's worked for him. So yeah, I think in that respect, crowd work is good, but I think there's a difference, that leads to your second point. I think when a speaker says, all right, let's all divide ourselves into 4 groups and we're all going to have this that's not crowd work. That's pre-planned, a part of your speech. Crowd work is you're working without a net. What do you do for the company? What do you do? What does that mean? How long have you been doing that? What is your goal? I had a guy this was in a club setting. He said, I just got out of college. I said, what was your major? He said, microbiology. And I said, was macrobiology too difficult for you? You wanted to start small and work your way up. All right. That's working without a net. He loved it. He thought it was funny. The crowd loved it. But did I go into the show thinking like, geez, I hope I've got a recent microbiology student sitting, because I know exactly what I'm going to say. But I will say one thing, though. In a corporate setting, I think working the crowd is a little bit riskier because they all know one another. If you're working maybe not if you're working for an association, but if you're working for a company, okay, these are all people that work together every day. So I think they're a little bit more guarded, an audience member, because they're like, well, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I get made fun of? My boss is sitting 2 rows behind me. Is he going to like my answer? You have to be very, very cognizant of that. And that there are some people that maybe don't want to play along. And I have to respect that. And I can tell. I can tell. If you don't want to participate, I'm not going to just keep hammering at you until you do. I will move on.
And that kind of range of emotions that some of the best speakers make the audience feel, what tactics did you use to get them absolutely hysterically laughing and then, feeling any other kind of emotion? How did you go about balancing the two and kind of getting to feel that whole range?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that I do in my presentation that a lot of, that's very rare among, I think, people consider themselves comedians or call themselves comedians, is I use visuals. I take screen grabs from their website. I will give their mission statement back to them and so forth. And there's 2 reasons I do that. Number one, it's almost like I'm saying, look, I didn't write this. You wrote it. This is on your website. I'm just copying and pasting here, but I'm an outsider. While it sounds very serious to you, it's funny to me, but it's funny because I don't really know as much about what you do as you do. So I am here not only to make you laugh about this, but I'm also here to learn. And I think that is what, once a corporate audience picks up on that he's not, I see some speakers come in and will tell an audience how they should be doing things better. And yet they have never worked in the industry. You can't do that. You can't come in as an outsider and say, you have to do this, you have to do this, and have never worked. I've seen some tension almost arise. It's because I think the audience is kind of looking like, who the hell is this guy coming in and telling us how to run our organization when he's billed as a consultant or whatever? If you have taken a company, if you're a person who one of your credits is you have taken a company and you brought it from here up to here, and it was in the industry that you're speaking for, oh yes, by all means, I will listen to you. I will be on, I will be shutting up and I want to hear everything you say, but don't come in and be an expert on something that you know nothing about. And that's one of the great things about hiring a humor speaker. We don't pretend to be experts on anything. My job's to make you laugh. And you're going to help me with that. And I'm going to help you by pointing out things. And this goes back to the visuals. I'm going to help you by pointing out things on your website that just sound funny when read by somebody from outside your industry.
How long did it take you to find the niche that you best spoke to? Because there's corporate speakers, but then there's tons of different kinds of corporations, right? Is there one that you're like, these guys, we connect best? I speak best to these guys. How long did it take you to find that?
Well, when I first started doing this, I was focusing on technology. And to this day, my company is still called Comedy with a Bite, BYTE. I focused on technology because I started doing corporate events in the mid-90s. Now, I don't know how old you are, Ryan, but I might, I don't know if you can go back to that, but in the mid-90s, that's when technology exploded. That is when all of us, Windows 95, Microsoft, Bill Gates was, and Steve Jobs were vying for, just the gods. That's what they were looked at. Everybody suddenly had a computer on their desk, and none of us had any idea what the hell to do with it. And that led to a lot of material. It was this mass confusion. I mean, I used to do a ton of material in my nightclub act about waiting on hold for tech support. And I would have people come up to me afterwards and say, if you would just come down and just do that bit, just that 5 minutes, you would kill it. And so now it's a little different now because technology is just so part of our lives. I mean, I'm starting to write a lot of jokes about artificial intelligence because that's what's on everybody's minds right now. And the fact that artificial intelligence is supposedly better at everything, and including trying to be better at comedy, which it's failing at, but that's a whole nother episode. So yeah, that was, but now as far as, I don't feel like there's an industry that I can't get in front of. The question is, do they want to laugh? I have found that there are certain industries that they really, I'll give you a great example. Like healthcare is great, but a bunch of doctors, no. And nothing against, I've met some very funny doctors, but I think for the most part, when they have an event and they're surrounded by one another, they would much rather hear a medical speaker than somebody like me.
And when you go and speak at these events, how far can you stray off of what you've told the event planner you're going to speak on? If you start talking and you're realizing this is just not connecting with the audience, this is not working. Yeah. How far can you be like, you know what, I'm going to totally pivot. The guy said I should talk about this, but realizing the people he's representing, the audience, they don't care about this at all.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And that's a very tricky situation. I think it's very difficult to pivot in a corporate event because you were hired to speak on this particular topic, and that's what you're going to do. If it doesn't work, if it's not going well, I mean, again, I don't hit a home run every single time. No speaker does. And all I can do is try to get them more engaged and so forth. But, it's interesting, though. I've had clients say to me, can you write out your presentation? And we'd like to look at it. And my response is, I could, but there's no guarantee that what I write is what I'm going to say. Because I don't have, comedy is not something you memorize. You don't memorize it word for word. It's not a play. It's not a one-act play. I can tell you what I'm going to talk about. And I also get clients say, okay, so the show's at 8:00 and it's 4:00 and we're doing sound check, and there'll be 4 decision makers in the room. And they'll say, if you could just kind of run through your act right now in front of us. That never works. That never works. Okay. I don't care who the comedian is. You cannot do comedy in front of 4 people who are basically judging you and then saying, oh, I don't think that one's going to work. Well, you can't. That's sort of a tricky situation. It's a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. And I have reached the point, and I think I'm entitled to say, trust me, trust the process. And the only reason I think I'm entitled to say that is because I have a track record, is because I've been doing it this long. You watched enough of my clips on YouTube or on my website and so forth. You were confident enough to put me in front of your people. Now you have to just let me do what I do best.
And a few more questions for you here. Number one, where can listeners find you on the internet? Where can they put a little mini Greg in their pocket and keep it with them?
Yeah, mini Greg would be obviously my website. So gregschwem.com, a little bit of that. I have a YouTube channel. I try to put myself on my YouTube channel in a lot of different situations. You can see me, when I'm not doing corporate work, I work about 10 weeks a year on cruise ships, which I love because you get people from all over the world that you're having to make laugh of all different, genres, demographics, things like that. So I love doing that. So you can see me there. I mean, obviously I'm on social media. I will tell you though, I am a little bit guarded on what I put on social media because I think, first of all, what I do is very unique. I don't want people stealing it. And I think sometimes it's best to just get a small taste. But I also want to caution meeting planners. Sometimes when you're hiring a humor speaker, they can be funny for 3 minutes, but you're hiring them for 60. All right. So think about that because, I've seen comedians, I've heard horror stories. They've just cracked, we saw this guy online and we thought he was funny and it was great, but he couldn't sustain it. And then he started drifting into areas that we told him not to. And we ended up having to pull the plug early. I've heard that a lot. So that's just a little tip for people. I can show you as much material as you. If you're really interested, I can show you a whole set. But I'd like to start out with something small, and then we'll talk about it.
Sure. And when did you make the decision to start the YouTube channel, and how has growing that impacted your speaking business?
I got on YouTube pretty much as soon as YouTube was a thing. I think it's vital because, especially with a humor speaker, you need to see them in action. You can't just read reviews or read something. You have to see them. And my first agent told me, he goes, if you're going to be a corporate speaker, we need to see you in a corporate setting. Meaning a corporate audience is very different than a club audience where everybody has Budweisers in front of them and so forth. These are people who are sitting at rounds of 8 or maybe classroom style. That's different. And I need to be dressed as a corporate speaker. I need to maybe be wearing a suit, or in some cases be wearing a tuxedo or something, because I think for hiring corporate speaker, the biggest event is comfortability. And you're not going to be comfortable unless you know that the person you hired has done this before. What
message would you have for the corporations that they're looking for speakers and they maybe have never thought of hiring a humor speaker, humorist, and now they're kind of thinking, oh, interesting. Never considered that.
Well, first of all, if you've had a bad experience, don't make that the barometer for all of us. I talk to companies sometimes, they're like, we had a guy 3 years ago, and I always say, stop, because I know how this story ends. All right. Mm-hmm. But I'm not that guy. So don't judge me based on how he or she worked out. I think that adding humor, though, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, I think it says something about your organization. I think it says that you are willing to have fun, that you're willing not to take yourselves too seriously. And it sets a tone. When I speak at the beginning of a meeting, of a 3-day event, it sets the mood. It says, hey, maybe it has been a tough year, but we're willing to laugh at ourselves. If I speak at the end of an event, it sends people off on a high note. And people remember something that made them laugh. They do. They might not remember all the charts and the pie graphs and the PowerPoints and so forth, but they do. If they laughed at a corporate event, they will remember that.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because people remember how you make them feel, not what you tell them. This is really interesting. So a lot of times speakers will help other speakers with, let's say a corporation comes to you and says, hey, I want my people to learn how to do this. Some speakers will come and they'll teach them that lesson, but through storytelling, so the person actually understands it and has that knowledge. It sticks with them because it was told to them through story. But I haven't heard of people teaching tactical and useful knowledge with humor, so they remember the actual knowledge of it. Like, Tony Robbins at his events, he'll get people super hyped up, but it's a hyped up energy so that they remember what he teaches them. It's not humor. Right. So if you were to invent that, maybe it exists already, I don't know, but how would you integrate humor into tactical lesson learning of information?
I think that I said it earlier, I don't think humor can be taught. I think you can make people realize that what is around them is funny, that they can look for humor in things. And that's what I try to teach people. I think that is the lesson, is that, you go to work every day and maybe you have a very stressful day, but did you miss an opportunity to laugh in that 8 or 10 hours? And did you miss something? And maybe that's what I want to bring out. Maybe that's what I found on your website and so forth. But, you're hiring people, and then I'll go in and I'll find the weirdest sounding job title on your help wanted part of your website and say, I've had marketing people come up to me afterwards, and because I've kind of read some of the stuff that I know they wrote, and some of them are like, that was really funny. And some are like, okay, maybe I need to rewrite that a little bit. So I've never had anybody just flat out annoyed with me, but I think that is really the tack that I take, is just look around and you're going to see something funny, even in the most serious of professions. I just came out with a book about basically that, and just kind of seeing the humor in things that not necessarily are funny.
Now, last question for you here. From all your 25 years experience, growing your speaking business, finding your niche, getting in your groove of being a professional speaker, what is one knowledge nugget that you have that you find would be so valuable to know if you were to start over again, that you would want to share with the aspiring speaker, the professional speaker, or the entrepreneur who speaks to grow their business?
For the aspiring speaker, get yourself a good video. Get yourself a good video, and kind of what I just said about how make it in a corporate setting. All right. You can't in your backyard with, Christmas lights and so forth is not going to cut it. So get a good video, make sure it's long enough and you're confident enough in it. If you're bill yourself as a humor speaker, you better be getting laughs, and they better be coming very quickly. So that would be an aspiring speaker. For an established speaker, I think always reinvent yourself. Always see what is, I have seen, there's been a lot of events in the world that have kind of impacted my speaking business. I mean, I've spoken through 9/11, and after 9/11, it was like, there were massive layoffs and the country was in, it's like, is this going to happen again type of thing? Everybody was just in a horrible mood and sad. And I had to kind of, my presentations had to kind of dig people out of that. I had to speak through, I've had to speak through Black Lives Matter and which resulted in DEI. And now, then of course I had to kind of craft my presentations. It's like, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter your sexual orientation. You can still find common ground through humor, as opposed to us driving each other apart all the time. Humor is what brings people together. I've always said music, sports, and comedy is what brings people together. That's what everybody can talk about, whether it's at a party. Those are three common topics. The problem is music and sports bring people together. Comedy has a tendency, can drive people apart, and it shouldn't be. And that's really what I'm focusing on now, I think, is that you guys are missing. If you continue to say, we can't say this and we can't say this and we shouldn't say this and this is taboo, you actually may be doing more harm than good. I mean, I retitled one of my presentations, Humor is Serious Business, but we should still be laughing. Okay. And that's what you're going to get. You can, yes, it's a touchy subject, but humor and introducing humor, whether it's into your marketing campaigns or just your office or your Friday afternoon meetings, is a lot more beneficial. There's a lot more positives than there are negatives.
Awesome. Well, if you're listening here and you found value in what Greg has been sharing here, send it to that one friend who's an aspiring speaker, or that one friend who's a professional speaker that you've heard them speak and say, hey, I was serious the whole time. Can you please integrate some humor? If they need to hear what Greg has shared here, do them that favor and share this episode with that one friend, just that one friend. Greg, thanks for taking the time to be here, and everyone listening, thank you for taking the time to listen.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ryan.
Cheers.